pilot down, right at takeoff. 1 second, the plane is screaming down the runway like any normal flight, the next second the captain's hands lock up on the controls, his body goes limp, and the jet keeps climbing in the wrong attitude. Passengers think it's turbulence, until the alarms start, the cabin tilts hard, and the screams spread faster than the oxygen masks ever could. The first officer fights the yoke like his life depends on it, because it does, but the aircraft shudders, the nose climbs too steep, and the warning system starts rattling like the plane itself is begging them to stop before it falls out of the sky. And that's when an 11-year-old girl, sitting quietly a few rows up with a kid's backpack and a hoodie, unclicks her seatbelt, steps into the aisle, and moves like she has one job: reach the cockpit before everyone on board becomes a headline. She pushes past terrified adults, past a flight attendant trying to hold her back, and she shouts something that freezes the crew in place, something only a trained pilot would even know to say. Minutes later, 2 F-22 fighter jets tear through the clouds to intercept the dying airliner, and what those fighter pilots see through the cockpit windows makes them do something they've never done for any civilian. They raise a full military salute to a child. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and if you want more unbelievable true-style aviation stories, hit subscribe. The crazy part is, that morning started like the most normal day on Earth. Dallas-Fort Worth Airport was already alive, rolling suitcases rattling over the floor, coffee cups in tired hands, families arguing softly about snacks and seats, business travelers staring into their phones like the world might end if they look up. At Gate 47, a Boeing 737 waited patiently under the early sunlight, scheduled to fly out to Seattle. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, just another routine flight in a sky full of routine flights. Flight attendants stood at the front with their professional smiles, scanning boarding passes, welcoming passengers like they'd done 1,000 times before. And blending into that crowd was a little girl who looked so ordinary that nobody gave her a second glance. She was about 11 years old, small, calm, dark hair tied neatly back, wearing jeans, white sneakers, and a purple hoodie with tiny astronaut cartoons printed across the chest. In one hand she dragged a small rolling suitcase, in the other she held a bright pink backpack that looked heavy for her size. Around her neck was a yellow, unaccompanied minor tag, the kind airport staff give kids who fly alone. So everyone assumed the same thing. She was just a kid going to see family, probably excited about cartoons, candy, and the airplane window view. The gate agent crouched down with that gentle voice adults use around children. "All right, sweetheart, you'll board early, okay? The crew will keep an eye on you." The girl nodded politely, quiet and well-behaved, the kind of child most parents would be grateful to have on a flight. "What are you gonna do on the plane?" the agent asked, smiling. "Watch movies." The girl gave a small shy smile. "My grandma downloaded some," she said softly. Simple, normal, innocent. She was escorted down the jet bridge like any other solo kid traveler. And when she stepped inside the plane, nobody knew they were watching the most important passenger on that flight. Because the truth was, she wasn't just going to Seattle. She was walking toward a moment that would force her to do something no child on Earth should ever have to do. And yet, she was the only one on board who could. Up in row 8 by the window, the little girl settled into her seat like she'd done it 100 times. The airline always put solo kids near the front for easy watching, so she ended up in 8A, pressed against the glass with the clouds waiting outside like a postcard. The woman beside her, an older lady with kind eyes and a soft scarf, smiled the way grandmas always do. "Flying all by yourself, honey. That's brave." The girl gave a polite nod and the smallest smile. "I'm going to see my grandma in Seattle," she said. "We'll go to the aquarium." And if you were watching from the aisle, you'd believe it completely. Because she looked like every other kid on spring break, quiet, polite, harmless. She pulled out her tablet and opened what looked like a normal children's app, bright colors, simple shapes, the kind of thing that screams, "Nothing to see here." But behind that innocent screen was something nobody in that cabin would ever guess. Because this wasn't just some random kid with cartoons and snacks. Her real name was Nora Hayes, and inside a classified military database, she had a family tag that made grown fighter pilots sit up straight. For 4 generations, the Hayes family had lived in cockpits. Her great-grandfather flew prop fighters in World War II. Her grandfather flew jets in Vietnam. And her father flew stealth missions he could never explain to anyone, not even friends. And at home, their family hobby wasn't soccer or piano lessons. It was simulators, checklists, emergency drills, and long nights where a man in a flight suit would pause a training run and say, "Again," because in the real world you don't get a second chance. Nora wasn't trained like a kid. She was trained like a pilot. Not because her dad wanted to show off, but because his family believed something simple and deadly serious. When panic hits, age doesn't matter. Only skill matters. He used to tell her. Fear is normal, freezing is the danger, the Hayes line doesn't freeze. So while other kids learned video games, Nora learned what stall feels like. She learned what the stick shaker means. She learned how to level wings, how to control speed, how to talk on the radio without shaking. And even now, sitting in her purple hoodie with her backpack at her feet, she was doing what she always did. Watching, listening, quietly noticing everything. A flight attendant stopped by her row, smiling like it was just another day. "Hi sweetheart, I'm Tasha, I'll be looking after you today," she said, pointing to the call button like Nora might not understand. "If you feel nervous during takeoff, just press this." Nora smiled the way kids are expected to smile. "I'll be fine, I've flown before." The flight attendant patted her shoulder and moved on, thinking she'd just met a well-behaved child. She didn't know that behind that shy voice was a mind that had memorized emergency steps the way other kids memorize song lyrics. And as the cabin doors sealed, and the plane began to push back from the gate, Nora's eyes drifted to the front of the aircraft, not scared, not excited. Focused. Because deep down, she had the kind of training that makes you feel something before it happens. And that morning, the airplane felt wrong. Up front in the cockpit, everything looked calm, clean, and routine. The captain, Alan Mercer, was the kind of pilot passengers loved without ever knowing it. Mid-50s, steady voice, decades of flying, hands that moved through switches and checklists like muscle memory. Beside him sat the first officer, Evan Brooks, early 30s, smart and capable, but still young enough to respect every move the captain made, the way new pilots do when they're flying with someone who's seen everything. They weren't joking around, they weren't distracted. They were doing what pilots always do. Numbers, settings, checks, confirmations. Fuel, flaps, trim, engines. Everything green, everything normal. And the scary truth is, Captain Mercer had no clue what was building inside his chest. No warning pain, no dizziness, no, "I don't feel right." Just a silent problem in his heart that was about to hit at the single worst moment a human being can fail in an airplane. Back in the cabin, people were still living normal lives. Someone was texting, "Taking off now." A kid was kicking a backpack. A man was asking for headphones. Nora's seatmate was adjusting her scarf. The flight attendants did their safety talk, the seatbelt signs chimed, and Nora watched it all with the same calm face. Not because she was bored. Because she was measuring the timing, the sounds, the feeling of the plane under her. Then the aircraft pushed back, and the slow taxi began. The jet rolled past other planes like a giant piece of machinery waking up, turning left, turning right, stopping, starting. The captain's voice came over the speakers, friendly and normal. "Good morning folks, we'll be heading to Seattle today, weather looks good, flight time about 3 hours, sit back and enjoy the ride." People relaxed even more after that, because that voice meant safety. But Nora didn't relax. She kept her eyes forward. Because she knew something most passengers forget. Takeoff is the most unforgiving part of the entire flight. No room for mistakes, no time to think slowly. Soon, the plane reached the runway, the wide-open strip of pavement that always looks calm from the window, but feels like a launching track from inside. The jet stopped at the threshold, engines humming. Final checks. A pause that lasted only seconds. Then the tower cleared them. Flight 2847, runway 18 right, cleared for takeoff. The captain eased the throttles forward, and the engines roared. The plane started rolling, then racing. The runway lights began to blur. 80 knots, then 100. And the pressure pressed everyone into their seats like an invisible hand. Evan called it out, steady and professional. V1. Point of no return. Past that speed, you don't stop, you go.
Would you like some water?
Nora felt her stomach tighten, not with fear, with awareness. Because the next call was the moment the whole aircraft commits to the sky. Evan's voice came again, louder over the roar. Rotate. And for half a second, nothing happened.
Pre-flight checks.
Not the normal smooth
Flap
lift,
set to 10
not the
degrees.
normal nose-up rise. Just a tiny delay that felt wrong. So small most people wouldn't notice. But Nora noticed. Because in her world, half a second at takeoff speed can become a lifetime. The moment Evan said, rotate, everything should have been smooth and automatic. The captain should have pulled back, the nose should have lifted, and the plane should have climbed like it had done thousands of times before. But instead, Captain Alan Mercer's hands stiffened on the controls like they'd frozen. His shoulders jerked, his face twisted, and then his whole body slumped forward in the harness. No warning, no slow build, just, gone. Right there, at the exact second the plane needed him most. Evan turned his head and saw it, saw the captain's eyes wide but empty, saw his chest not moving, saw his hands locked where they shouldn't be. And in that same instant, the aircraft was still charging down the runway faster than most cars will ever go. They were past the point of no return, runway disappearing behind them, pavement running out ahead. Evan lunged across, trying to pull the controls free while also trying to keep the aircraft straight. His brain was screaming two different emergencies at once. My captain is dying, and this plane is about to become a fireball. He yanked the control column back late, too late, and the jet finally lifted off. But it didn't lift off clean. It leapt. The nose pitched up too steep, like the plane was trying to climb a wall. Passengers felt it immediately, that wrong angle, that heavy push, that feeling of being dragged upward instead of smoothly rising. A few people cheered for a second, thinking takeoff was just strong today. Then the shudder hit. A violent trembling through the floor, through the seats, through the overhead bins, like the aircraft was shaking itself apart. And from the front, a sound started rattling, loud and angry, a mechanical warning that didn't belong in a normal flight. The stick shaker, the stall warning, the plane screaming in its own language, you're climbing too steep, you're losing speed, you're about to fall. Evan's hands were white on the controls. He tried pushing forward, then pulling back again, overcorrecting, fighting the aircraft while the dead weight of the captain slumped beside him. The altimeter barely climbed, the airspeed began bleeding down, and the nose stayed too high. And back in the cabin, the calm broke like glass. A man yelled, "What is that sound?" Someone started praying out loud. A child began crying so hard they couldn't breathe. Flight attendants shouted for everyone to stay seated, but their voices were thin against the panic. The plane rocked again, harder, and people grabbed armrests and strangers' sleeves. Nora felt it like a punch to the gut. Not fear first.
Would you like some water?
Recognition.
Or maybe a sticker?
Because she knew exactly what a near stall felt like. She'd felt it in simulators, she'd heard that warning 100 times in training, she'd practiced the recovery until it was burned into her bones. And what she felt now was worse than any practice, because this wasn't a screen and a reset button.
Set to 10 degrees.
This was real sky, real ground, real lives. She glanced toward the cockpit area. And in the sound of the shudder, in the delayed rotation, in the violent warning, one truth locked into her mind. Something had happened to the pilots, and the person flying up front was losing control. Her seatmate grabbed her arm, trembling. "Sweetheart, don't move, stay buckled." But Nora's breathing stayed steady. Because in her head she could almost hear her father's voice, calm and hard. "When seconds matter, you move, or people die." Nora reached down, clicked her seatbelt open, and stood up into the shaking aisle. And as the plane groaned and dipped like it was about to drop out of the sky, she started walking toward the cockpit, like she already knew she was the last option. Nora took one step into the aisle and the whole cabin felt like a nightmare that wouldn't wake up. The plane was still climbing, but not smoothly, it was shuddering and trembling like a giant animal fighting to stay in the air. People were yelling, some were crying, someone behind her shouted for the flight attendants. And the flight attendants themselves looked different now, no smiles, no calm, just wide eyes and fast breathing. One of them grabbed the intercom, voice cracking. "Everyone stay seated, keep your seatbelts on." But Nora didn't sit. She moved forward, steady, gripping the seatbacks as she walked because the angle of the aircraft made the aisle feel like a tilted ladder. The older woman in 8B reached out and tried to pull her back.
Confirming pre-flight checks.
"Baby, no,
Flaps
please,
set to 10
sit
degrees.
down." Nora gently slipped free, not rude, not scared, focused. Near row 5, flight attendant Tasha stepped in front of her, palms out like a barrier. "Nora, stop, you have to sit, it's not safe." And that's when Tasha saw her face. It wasn't the face of a confused child. Nora's eyes were sharp, locked on the cockpit door like a target. Her voice dropped into something calm, flat, almost military. "Both pilots are compromised," she said, loud enough to cut through the screaming. "This aircraft is close to a stall, if I don't reach the cockpit now, we won't have a minute." Tasha froze, because kids don't talk like that. Kids don't use words like compromised and stall at 1,500 feet while a jet shakes itself apart. And in that half second of shock, Nora slipped past her and ran the last few steps to the cockpit door. The cockpit door was locked. Of course it was. So Nora did the only thing she could, she slammed her fist against it, hard, again and again. "First officer," she shouted, voice steady like she'd done this before. "Open the door, I can stabilize your aircraft."
How are you feeling, sweetheart?
Inside,
Would you
Evan
like some
Brooks
water
was
or
drowning.
maybe a sticker?
One hand on the controls, the other reaching for switches, alarms screaming, Captain Mercer slumped motionless beside him like a terrible statue. Evan was trying to fly, trying to think, trying not to die. Then he heard a child's voice
Confirming
through the
pre-flight
door.
checks.
At first he
Flaps
thought
set
it was
to 10
panic,
degrees.
another distraction, another impossible problem. But then the voice came again, different, sharper. "You're pitched too high," Nora called. "Airspeed is dropping below safe climb, push the nose down and set a stable attitude." Evan's head snapped toward the door. Because what she just said wasn't random. That was pilot language. That was the exact correction he needed. His hands shook, his mind screamed, "This is insane." But the plane shook harder, the warning rattled again, and he felt the aircraft on the edge of falling. Then Nora said something that hit like a key turning in a locked door. "My family call sign is Skyfire," she shouted. "Check your emergency briefings, you'll know what that means, open the door." Evan didn't know why, maybe it was the wording, maybe it was the certainty, maybe it was the fact that she sounded more controlled than he felt. But that name sparked a distant memory from training files, stories pilots whispered about military families who raised real aviators. And at that moment, Evan didn't need pride. He needed a miracle. His trembling hand slapped the unlock switch. The cockpit door clicked open. And Nora Hayes stepped in, purple hoodie, small hands, calm eyes.
A sticker would be
The
nice.
air inside the cockpit was chaos, flashing lights, screaming alarms, and the dead captain slumped in the left seat. Nora didn't gasp, didn't hesitate. Her eyes scanned the instruments in one fast sweep like she
Confirming
was reading a
pre-flight
page
checks.
she'd memorized.
Flaps set to 10
Then
degrees.
she spoke like a commander, not a child. "Evan," she said, using his name like she'd known him for years. I'm taking the controls, you handle radio and checklists, confirm. Evan swallowed hard, heart pounding so loud he could hear it. And somehow, the standard words came out of his mouth, because pilots are trained to trust procedure even when reality makes no sense. You have the controls, he whispered. Nora's fingers wrapped around the yoke. She pushed forward gently, reducing the pitch, calming the aircraft. The shaking eased, the warning began to fade, and the airspeed stopped bleeding away. For the first time since takeoff, the plane started to feel like a plane again. And in that cockpit, with a dead captain beside them and a child flying a 737, Evan realized the truth. This wasn't just bravery. This was training meeting disaster. And if Nora didn't stay perfect for the next few minutes, none of them were making it home. The second Nora stabilized the nose, the whole cockpit changed. The alarms didn't disappear, but they stopped feeling like a death sentence. The stick shaker fell silent. The airspeed climbed back into a safe range.
How are you feeling, sweetheart?
And the plane finally started climbing like it was supposed to.
A sticker would be nice.
Evan stared at the instruments like he couldn't believe what he was seeing, then he looked at her again. An 11-year-old, flying cleaner than he was. Nora didn't even look at him, her eyes stayed locked on the panel, scanning
Confirming
left to
pre-flight
right in a
checks.
tight rhythm, airspeed,
Flaps set to 10
attitude,
degrees.
altitude, vertical speed, engine power, heading, back again. Evan, she said, calm but firm. Talk to the tower. Declare an emergency. Tell them the captain is down. We need vectors back right now. Evan swallowed, snapped back into duty, and grabbed the radio like it was a lifeline. Tower, this is Coastal 2847, we have an emergency. Captain is unresponsive. Request immediate return and priority landing. The controller didn't ask questions, their voice shifted instantly into that serious tone. Coastal 2847, Roger. Turn left heading 090, climb and maintain 3000. Emergency crews are rolling. Nora rolled the aircraft into the turn like she was drawing a straight line with a pen, smooth bank, steady speed, no drifting, no panic. Then she started giving orders like she'd been sitting in that seat her whole life. Confirm flaps, she said. Confirm gear up. Check fuel and tell me our landing weight. Evan answered automatically, grateful to have a job he could actually do. Flaps 5, gear up, fuel shows
How are you
63,000.
feeling, sweetheart?
We're
Would you like
heavy.
some water or maybe
Nora
a
nodded
sticker? A
once,
sticker would be
already
nice.
calculating in her head. Okay. We'll need a higher approach speed. We'll set up for the ILS back to the same runway. Don't touch anything unless I ask. Behind them, flight
Confirming
attendant
pre-flight
Tasha
checks.
stood in the doorway like she'd stepped
Flaps set
into
to 10
another
degrees.
universe. The captain slumped motionless. Evan on radios, pale and sweating. And Nora, small hands steady on the controls. Tasha whispered, barely audible. Nora, how are you doing this? Nora didn't turn, she just said it straight. My dad trained me. Now please go prepare the cabin. Tell them we're landing soon. Keep everyone seated. Tasha didn't argue, she just nodded and backed away like she was scared to break the moment. Out in the cabin, passengers still had no idea who was up front, they just felt the change. The shuddering eased. The nose leveled. The plane stopped feeling like it was falling. But the fear didn't leave, because they could still sense something was very wrong. Meanwhile, in a quiet military operations room outside the public airport system, another set of eyes caught the emergency call. A duty officer heard the radio traffic and pulled up the flight tag. Commercial jet, emergency return, pilot unresponsive. But then something else stood out. A second voice in the background, clear, calm, using exact aviation terms with no hesitation. The officer leaned closer to the audio feed, frowned, and ran a quick voice analysis through a secure system meant for identifying pilots during joint airspace incidents. And what came back made her sit up hard. The match wasn't perfect, but it flagged a rare family identifier, a legacy tag used in certain military
Confirming
circles.
pre-flight checks.
A name that carried
Flaps set
serious
to 10
weight among
degrees.
fighter crews. She immediately called her superior, voice tight. "Sir, this may sound impossible, but the data suggests the aircraft is being flown by a minor. And the voice match is linked to the Hayes family line." There was a pause on the other end, then a low, sharp reply. "If that's true, she might be the most capable person in that cockpit right now." The officer didn't waste another second. Requesting military support for visual confirmation and escort. Orders moved fast after that, the way they only do when lives are hanging by minutes. 2 F-22 Raptors on alert duty were tasked to intercept and escort the airliner during its emergency approach. Not to take over, not to threaten. To confirm, support, and clear the airspace if anything went sideways. Back in the cockpit, Nora flew exactly like the clock was ticking, because it was. Approach control came in. Coastal 2847, turn left heading 060, descend and maintain 2000. Expect ILS runway 18 right. Nora responded with perfect timing. Left 060, down to 2000, coastal 2847. Evan blinked at her,
How are you
because the
feeling,
readback was
Would you like
flawless.
some water or maybe
He'd
a
flown
sticker?
with
A
captains
sticker
who
would be
sounded
nice.
less steady than this child. As they began descending, Nora eased the power back with tiny adjustments, keeping the descent smooth so the cabin wouldn't panic even more. Then she said, calm as if they were in a simulator,
Confirming pre-flight checks.
"Evan, when I say,
Flaps set to 10 degrees.
set flaps 15. Then we'll go gear down. You'll run the checklist. No skipping." Evan nodded, almost whispering. "Understood." Outside, high above the clouds, two dark shapes were already carving through the sky at insane speed. F-22s, closing in. And Nora didn't know it yet. But in just a few minutes, fighter pilots, some of the best aviators on Earth, would look into that cockpit, see who was flying, and realize they weren't watching a miracle. They were watching a legacy come to life under pressure. Approach control brought them around like they were threading a needle through the sky. Coastal 2847, you're 12 miles from the runway, turn left heading 010, maintain 2000 until established, cleared ILS runway 18 right. Evan repeated the clearance, voice steadier now because he finally had something solid to hold on to. Nora didn't celebrate, she didn't smile, she didn't even blink much. She just guided the jet into the turn, lining the nose toward the invisible radio beam that would lead them straight to the runway like a glowing road only pilots can see. "Flaps 15, now," she said. Evan moved fast, hands working the
How
lever.
are you feeling, sweetheart?
The wings
Would you like
changed
some water
shape,
or
the
maybe a
aircraft
sticker?
slowed
A
slightly,
sticker would be
and
nice.
Nora adjusted power with small, controlled movements. "Gear down on my call," she added, eyes flicking between the localizer needle and the glide slope. Outside the cockpit windows, the city and airport came into
Confirming
view under
pre-flight
them,
checks.
and for the first time the passengers
set to
could
10
see
degrees.
ground close enough to feel real fear. Because when you're in trouble, you don't want to see the ground that clearly. Evan looked down at the captain for a half second, still slumped, still unmoving, and he forced himself to look away. "Gear down," Nora said. Evan dropped the landing gear. The plane thumped, drag increased, the nose wanted to sink, and Nora caught it instantly with power and pitch. "Before landing checklist," she ordered. Evan started reading it out like his life depended on it, because it did. Then a new sound cut through the air outside, a deep distant howl that didn't belong to a passenger jet. Two black shapes sliced through the clouds, fast, sharp, unreal. F-22 Raptors. They didn't come in loud and sloppy, they came in like ghosts with knives, sliding into position on both sides of the airliner, one left, one right, matching speed perfectly. Evan's eyes widened as he caught the movement. "Military escort," he muttered, half to himself. Nora didn't look over, not yet, not fully, because at this stage even curiosity can kill you. The lead fighter on the left eased closer, close enough that the pilot could see inside the airliner's cockpit windows.
How are you
In the
feeling,
Raptor,
sweetheart?
Major
Would you like
Cade
some water
Viper
or
Lawson
maybe a
stared
sticker?
through his
A
visor
sticker
and
would be
felt his
nice.
stomach drop. Because it was real. A child in the left seat, small shoulders, hoodie, hands steady on the controls, flying a full passenger jet like she belonged there. On the right side, Captain
Confirming
Mara
pre-flight
Echo
check.
Sloan matched position
Flaps
and
set
saw
to
the
10
same
degrees.
thing. The dead captain slumped beside her, the first officer running checklists, and the girl holding it all together. Lawson keyed his mic, voice low, respectful without even trying. Ops, Viper flight has visual, confirmed, Miner at the controls, aircraft stable on the approach, she's flying it clean. Back in Nora's cockpit, the runway lights grew bigger, centerline stretching ahead like a promise and a threat at the same time. Flaps 30, Nora said. Evan set them. The wings bit harder into the air, the jet slowed toward landing speed, and the glide slope needle stayed centered like Nora was glued to it. Speed, Evan called. Stable. Nora's eyes stayed forward. Keep calling altitude, she said. 500, Evan announced. A small crosswind gust pushed at the nose, and Nora corrected with a gentle input, not fighting, guiding. 400. The runway numbers were coming fast now, no time left for fear, only execution. 300. The jet felt heavy, like it wanted to drop, and Nora held it on the glide path with tiny power changes. 200. The fighters stayed in formation, watching like guardians, not interfering, just witnessing. 100. Nora's breathing remained even, but Evan could see the tension in her hands, the grip of someone holding the weight of 147 lives in 10 fingers. 50. Nora began the flare,
Confirming
raising the
pre-flight
nose just
checks.
enough, not too much,
Flaps set
letting
to
the
10
descent
degrees.
rate soften. 30. The runway filled the windshield. 20. Then the main wheels touched down. Not hard, not dramatic, just a smooth kiss of rubber on asphalt that made the cabin jolt with relief instead of terror. Nora deployed the spoilers, Evan pulled reverse thrust, and the plane slowed hard but controlled, staying perfectly on the centerline. Evan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. That was perfect, he whispered. Outside, the emergency vehicles raced alongside, lights flashing like a moving wall of red and blue. And the two F-22s, still pacing them as they rolled out, did something that made even hardened controllers in the tower go quiet. Major Lawson lifted his hand to his helmet, crisp and formal. Captain Sloan did the same. A full military salute. Not for a general, not for a president, not for a medal ceremony. For an 11-year-old girl who just landed a commercial airliner when grown professionals couldn't. And Nora, still focused, still driving the jet down the runway like it was the last stretch of a race, guided them to a safe exit, slowed to taxi speed, and brought the aircraft under control. Because the landing was only the climax. The real victory was that everyone was alive to feel it. The moment the plane cleared the runway, the cabin didn't explode into applause like movies. It exploded into shaking breaths, sobs, and people holding each other like they'd just survived a storm they didn't understand.
Confirming
Some
pre-flight
passengers
checks.
were still frozen, hands
set to
locked
10
around
degrees.
armrests, eyes wide like their brains hadn't caught up to the fact that the ground wasn't rushing at them anymore. Others were praying out loud, thanking God, whispering names of family members they thought they'd never see again. Up front, Nora guided the jet onto a taxiway exactly the way she practiced in simulators, slow and steady. Emergency vehicles surrounded them like a moving fortress, fire trucks, ambulances, airport police, all pacing the aircraft as if it might break apart at any second. Approach handed them off to ground control, and Evan's voice, still shaky but working, answered every instruction. They rolled into a designated emergency stand, away from the busy gates, where responders were already waiting. Nora brought the aircraft to a complete stop, set the parking brake, and for the first time since takeoff, her hands loosened. Not because she was finally relaxed. Because the job was finally done. Evan stared at her like he didn't even know what to say. He looked over at Captain Mercer, still slumped, skin pale, unmoving. Then the cockpit door burst open and paramedics rushed in, their gear clanking, voices sharp and trained. Captain unresponsive, Evan said quickly, moving aside. Cardiac arrest at rotation.
Would you like some water?
They started
Or maybe a
CPR
sticker?
immediately,
A sticker would be
pushing
nice.
hard, fast, trying to pull a man back from a moment that had already passed. Nora slid out of the seat carefully, stepping back like she knew she was now in the way. A paramedic glanced at her, then did a double take.
Confirming pre-flight checks.
"Are you hurt?" he asked,
Flaps
like
set
his
to 10
brain
degrees.
couldn't accept the scene. Nora shook her head. "No injuries. Aircraft is secured. Parking brake set. Engine stable," she said, calm as if she was reporting weather. Outside, the passengers were being told to stay seated, but fear made people stand anyway, some crying, some demanding answers. Flight attendant Tasha walked the aisle, voice trembling but steady enough to lead. "We're safe. Please stay seated. Help is here." And slowly, the truth started spreading, row by row, like electricity. The captain died. The first officer couldn't control it. A child flew the plane. At first people laughed nervously, like that was impossible. Then they saw her. A small girl being escorted carefully down the aisle, purple hoodie, pink backpack strap still on her shoulder. People stared like they were seeing a ghost. One man whispered, That's the kid." The older woman from 8B broke down crying, pointing with shaking hands. "She was sitting next to me, she was just sitting next to me." When Nora reached the front, airport officials and airline supervisors were waiting, faces tight and pale. Behind them came more serious suits, the kind of people who don't introduce themselves loudly, the kind who speak in short sentences and look at everything like evidence. Evan was pulled aside for a quick debrief. "Walk us through the takeoff. What happened to the
Confirming pre-flight
captain?
checks.
When did you
Flaps
lose
set to 10
control?
degrees.
Who opened the cockpit door?" Evan didn't try to protect his pride. He told the truth, voice heavy. "I was overwhelmed. The captain collapsed at rotation. I delayed, I overpitched, the aircraft nearly stalled. If she hadn't come in, we wouldn't be here." The airline manager looked like he might sit down. Because admitting that out loud sounded insane. But the data would prove it. The flight recorder would show the near stall. The cockpit recording would capture Nora's voice, calm and precise. The approach track would show a stable return and a flawless landing. And while that was happening, something else moved quietly in the background. The fighters were gone now, but their reports had already been filed. And once the word "child pilot" started leaking toward social media and news outlets, another layer of authority stepped in. Not to punish her. To protect her. Phones appeared in passengers' hands, trying to film, trying to capture the girl who landed the plane. But airport security shut it down fast, asking people to respect privacy, moving Nora through a side corridor, away from cameras, away from questions. Because the moment the world learned her identity, her life would never be normal again.
A sticker would be
In a
nice.
private room, investigators sat across from Nora with notepads and clipped voices. They expected a shaken child, tears, confusion, fear. Instead they got calm answers. "Do you know what you did?"
Confirming pre-flight
one
checks.
asked gently.
Flaps set to 10
Nora
degrees.
nodded once. "I prevented a stall and returned for an emergency landing," she said. "Who trained you?" another asked. Nora hesitated just long enough to choose her words. "My father taught me through simulators and ground study," she replied, careful. Evan was brought in later and he looked at her like he couldn't stop himself. "Nora," he said quietly, voice breaking just a little. "You saved everyone on board." For the first time all day, Nora's face softened, just a fraction. Not proud, not excited. Just tired. Because when you carry a plane full of lives on your hands, the crash doesn't end when the wheels touch the runway. It ends when you finally realize, it could have gone the other way. And outside that room, the airport was already filling with rumors. News vans arriving, reporters asking questions, people refreshing their phones. Trying to understand how a normal morning flight turned into the most unbelievable emergency landing they'd ever heard about. And the world was about to find out. This wasn't just a lucky moment. This was a legacy colliding with disaster, and winning. Later, when the sirens faded and the airport noise returned to normal, Nora finally sat down in a quiet room that didn't move. No engine hum, no shaking floor, no alarms. Just a bottle of water on a table and fluorescent lights that made everything feel too real. Outside the window, people walked past like it was any other day, dragging luggage, laughing, complaining about delays. And that's what felt strangest. Because for Nora, time had split into two worlds. One world where she was an ordinary kid in a purple hoodie going to see her grandma. And another world where she was the reason 147 people were still breathing. Evan came in after giving his statement, eyes red, face drained like he'd aged 10 years in 1 hour. He didn't sit right away, he just stood there, looking at her like his brain still couldn't accept what happened. Finally he said, voice quiet. I've trained for emergencies, my whole career, and when it happened, I froze inside. Not completely, but enough. If you didn't come in, none of us make it. Nora looked down at her hands, the same hands that had held the yoke steady while the plane begged not to stall. They taught me to move, she said softly. That's all. A moment later, Tasha stepped in, eyes swollen from crying, and she didn't even try to hide it. I tried to stop you, she whispered. I thought I was protecting you. Nora nodded like she understood, because she did. You were doing your job, she said. And then, in the hallway outside, the sound of boots stopped, the kind of stop that feels intentional.
How are you feeling, sweetheart?
Two uniformed
Would you like some
officers
water
stood with
or
calm
maybe a
faces,
sticker?
not
A sticker would
threatening,
be
not
nice.
loud, just there. One of them spoke gently. We're going to move you to a safer place. The media is getting aggressive. That's when Nora realized it. The flight was over, but the story
pre-flight
wasn't.
checks.
Because the
Flaps set
moment
to 10
people hear,
degrees.
11-year-old flew a plane, they don't hear, emergency. They hear, headline. They hear, viral. They hear, prove it. And suddenly you're not a child anymore. You're a phenomenon. Nora was escorted through a quiet corridor, away from cameras, away from phones trying to zoom in on her face. And as she walked, she caught a glimpse through a glass door, out toward the runway. Far in the distance, two fighter jets were parked, silhouettes against the sky. She remembered the salute. Not flashy, not dramatic. Just two of the best pilots in the world, silently recognizing something they understood better than anyone else. Control under pressure. Courage without noise. Skill when fear tries to steal your hands. That salute wasn't saying, good job, kid. It was saying, we know what it costs to keep it together when everything is falling apart. That night, after the interviews, after the questions, after the adults stopped talking long enough for the silence to return, Nora finally got a call from her father. His voice came through careful and tight, like he was holding emotions back with force. You did exactly what you were trained to do, he said.
How are you feeling, sweetheart?
You didn't
Would you like
panic.
some water or maybe
You
a
didn't
sticker?
freeze.
A sticker would be nice.
You stayed with the aircraft. Nora swallowed, eyes burning. The captain, she started, but couldn't finish. Her father paused, then said something that sounded like a lesson and a hug at the same time.
Confirming pre-flight checks.
Sometimes you can do everything
Flaps set
right,
to 10
and
degrees.
still lose someone. That's why we train. Not to be heroes. To reduce the damage when life hits hard. Nora nodded, tears finally slipping down, quiet and hot. Not because she wanted praise. Because she finally had space to feel what she couldn't feel in the cockpit. That she was a kid. And she just sat beside death and flown through it. Days later, the passengers went home with stories they'd tell for the rest of their lives. Some would say it was a miracle. Some would say it was destiny. But the truth was simpler and heavier. One pilot died doing his job. One first officer fought as hard as he could in an impossible moment. And one child had been trained so intensely, so seriously, that when the world demanded the impossible, she had the muscle memory to answer. Nora didn't ask for a salute. She didn't ask for fame. She just did what needed to be done. And that's why people will remember her. Not as the kid who flew the plane, but as proof that courage isn't loud. Competence isn't old. And sometimes the person who saves you is the person you'd never think to look at twice in the boarding line. If you made it to the end, comment where you're watching from, and tell me, what would you do if you realized the person saving everyone was only 11 years old, and don't forget to subscribe for more real style stories like this.